So the class I want to talk about here and how I use it is a Bachelor's of Science in Management class. So at the Graziadio School, we have it's a graduate school, we have one undergraduate program, and it's business, it's for fully employed adult learners who, they go at night and weekends primarily, and it's basically a bachelor's completion program. They have to have at least 2 years of experience of units coming into it, and we round it out. And it's really an MBA feeder. So when they come into it, these are strong bachelor students. But the idea is that most of them hopefully can go into our MBA programs for it. But they bring a lot of real-world experience. Immense, in fact. That's one of the challenges teaching it, because if you go in and you say one thing, they're doing it different in their company, you better get ready for a battle. It's a fun battle, but it's a challenge. And so this sets up a unique environment where they're used to high-level engagement working in business. Most of them have had traditionally ground-based courses, and we're now pushing them more into hybrid and online courses. Not exclusively, but we're trying to mix the medium, let them learn different environments for it. And we're doing it in a capstone course, which is a bit challenging, right? So this is the final course in the program. It's strategy, but we're looking at every aspect of business, HR, accounting, quant skills, and trying to make sure they've got it all, but they can apply it to managing a company from a strategic viewpoint. For it. And generally the classes, my class, you'll have of course your readings, lectures, lecturettes primarily, half posted online, half in class. But cases, a group project where they do a business plan, and then the simulation. Those are my 3 pillars for it. Now, what's different in this hybrid, so you have 7 online sessions, 8 in class, and the classes are on Saturdays. I've taken the simulation and moved it entirely into the online environment. So we don't do any of it in class. They use the in-class time from other experiments for it. This is a little different in our MBA program, our fully employed MBA program. We have a full class just for the sim. It's run over a weekend. It's a whole unique experience in itself. This is a whole different beast because I'm layering it within an existing class of how do we use a simulation. So some of the learning outcomes I'm looking for, beyond the skill set of do I know how to do strategic thinking and management, is learning how to work effectively in multidisciplinary teams. Very challenging, one of the key skills we want. Understanding the business as an integrated system, right? Multiple units affecting each other, and how one decision here affects the rest of it. And then the ability to compete in a dynamic environment for it I'm trying to create. The goal is not to create a game. The goal is to create a learning environment where they're running a company and seeing the challenges are there. I introduced Randy. So I've been using CapSim simulations for 9 years now here. I've used at least 10 other sims in different programs. Some specific for person unique skills, some single person ones. But CapSim for this class really brought all the pieces together. So I'd like to introduce Randy. He's going to give you a little overview of their thought process and how they developed their platform and what the base of the platform is. And then I'll show you how I actually use it.
So hi guys, my name is Randy Seeley. I'm the head of the academic sales team for CapSim. Just a quick background, I've worked for 2 of the major 3 publishers, McGraw-Hill, Cengage. So simulations aren't new to me. So business simulation game and GloBiz are a couple of the big ones. MindTap is another one. So where CapSim differs is we sort of work from the outside in. CapSim's background is 31 years old. Our president and founder actually was doing consulting work for major corporations, and they were asking him for an experiential. I want to help train and build up the knowledge of my team. So he built a simulation for that purpose. So it had to be dynamic, it had to be engaging, it had to be realistic. And he was also a professor at Northwestern and at DePaul, so his students became his guinea pig. He found one that really worked, that really was helping him meet the needs of his classroom, and that's where CapSim, our flagship simulation, started. And it was just a natural progression from, well, we have a simulation, I need to be able to test. And it needs to be dynamic as well, like the simulation. So we actually have an assessment arm of CapSim, which is actually used for assessment and assurance of learning. So you can actually use the simulation in an individual setting to prove these students are learning all aspects and concepts that you're trying to deliver. So CapSim, right, so we have about 5, 6 different simulations now, 3 or 4 different assessments. We moved on to soft skills assessments because we've heard from corporations, because we still do those consulting work, that students are coming out with their technical skills. We're not worried that they're going to know how to do accounting, they're going to know how to do marketing, but the soft skills, leadership, communication, working in teams, they don't know how to do that. So we've actually built 3 different products for that end. So that's a quick background. Is there anything else you wanted me to cover?
I'm going to describe what is the SIM.
Oh, okay.
Cover foundations.
Yeah, so let's use foundation. So the SIM is broken up into 4 different departments: R&D, marketing, production, and finance. You're meant to work as a team. It could also be done individually, but the idea is you assign a group of 3 to 5, 6 students to a team, and they have to figure out how they're going to monitor this company. So you take over a company that's kind of depleted, it's not really doing well. You have to get things on track, compete in a closed market, so there's 6 teams, 6 to 10 teams, whether they're computerized or run by students. You are selling sensors, so you're a sensor company. You're doing about, I think it's $10 million in business or something like that, and so you have to run the company from these 4 departments. And we can throw in things like HR, TQM, you can run recessions, you can Monte Carlo growth rates to put in that realistic content. And you can run this in, like you said, a weekend to a full 16-week semester. It's that dynamic, so you can run it over and over again. And the human aspect of it is what changes the parameters every time you engage in it, because decisions I make today won't work the same next week, won't work the same as like the following week, which is I think the positive thing about simulations over a case study or a quiz that get the frat files and things like that.
Excellent, thank you. So what does it take to pull off a sim in an online environment? What are some of the things that come across? One, first is you're going to put together a team. An online environment can be very difficult. I recommend self-select a team. Let them choose their teams. It takes you out of the guilt position if they don't like their team for it. And the number is 4 to 5. Under 4, so 3 and under, there's too much work, and they get overwhelmed. At 6, one, you generally have a slacker who fits in, or it just gets too difficult to manage the process. Now, this is within this simulation, the amount of work required for it. And peer review is a huge component for it, of their grade, so I'll show that a little bit later on. Before they're getting started, they get their team together. I have them put together a basic business plan. I give them a general template, so nothing wrong, but this is what our strategy is going to be. But more importantly, I go, how are you going to run your team? How do you think you're going to run your team? What are the titles, what are the roles, what's your mission and vision for your company? So I get them into the more of the higher thinking process of, hey, we're not just here to exercise a project, we are running a company and a team, and we're going to have to come back to it. We're going to have to talk about it. So that's been a real key learning for it, is understanding them to think about how do we think we'll operate. And then, of course, how that changes is a big part of the learning piece. And then the learning curve. Any of the really good sims I've used, and CapSim is not the only one, there are other ones, but my favorite, at least for strategy, there is a pretty significant learning curve to using just the platform. Right? There's just, from both a faculty level, but also from the student viewpoint for it. So I found that you have to have 2 things. You need an individual rehearsal. There has to be some module, it doesn't have to be full functioning, where the individual can take it and I can actually see they've gone through it and shown some mastery. So some sort of quizzes or something after it. In this case, I just added on for CapSim, they have it, and I just put a little quiz at the end to make sure they've got it. The next step is in their teams, they have to do practice rounds. You can't just throw them right into competition. What happens is they end up, well, one team will really mess it up because they don't understand one of the levers of decisions, or they'll throw extra 0. And now they're just catching up and they're stressed. The learning environment is as strong as I want for it. So I generally recommend 3 practice rounds. First one is they have no clue, but they get to see results. Second one, they're kind of trying to figure out, oh, I see what this means. By third, they've figured out the interface, and now they're really trying to interpret the reports and going, how do I make decisions off of this? Right? But they haven't mastered it yet. Right? It's the nice spot. No one thinks they're going into the competition rounds fully ready, but I know that they're probably not going to get held up by the technology and the interface for it. So those are 3 getting ready for it. During the sim, some of the things to do to make it sure it works out well. One is throw a curveball. In our FEMBA program, we have called interventions, or when we run it over the weekend, and we'll do all sorts of things to kind of throw students off the game. Right? give them certain scenarios or board meetings or approvals, or every faculty does a little bit differently for it. Online's a little bit more difficult. Like, my interventions have to be within the system or at least very closely related. And I use two. So anytime they're doing any finance activity, run into an emergency loan or something that can happen in the system, or want to do any stock transactions, they have to ask the board of directors for approval. And I have an online form that they fill it out, they submit it, and then if they're doing well, they get the nice rubber stamp from the board. If they're not doing well, I hit them hard and go, why do you want this money? What are you going to do it for? You know, make sure they have some good understanding of the finances and how to describe the decisions behind it. But my real curveball is an ethics dilemma, which is built into CAPSIM. It's nice. They have 6 different ones for it, and it presents each student with a certain ethical dilemma. It's a really cloudy one, right? It's one of those ones, and then the answers that are there are not the optimal answers. They're all a little bit uncomfortable. And that's good. It challenges them to go, hey, these are the only things available right now in this decision, based on what they choose and the rest of their teams choose. So they do the decisions individually, but together it creates a consensus. That's what the team gets assigned. Now, all of them have some ramifications. They're either going to hit you expenses up front and then you get demand later on. If you make an ethical decision, you might have a really good next year, and then you're going to get hit with other expenses and loss of demand in future rounds. So they have to think future rounds into it, and then regardless of whatever decision is made, they now have to decide, how does this affect my forecasting, my planning, my decisioning, where within the normal constructs of it. I do 8 rounds, 1 a week is how I do it in my class. So they're making a decision generally right before class starts, so that's the deadline. They'll process, they won't get to see the decisions. During class, I will do a debrief, which is built into the system. It's like a PowerPoint, go through revenue numbers, top line income statement, some of the basic financial ratios, market share, stock price for it. But I lead that. But I do it kind of from a neutral analyst viewpoint. I kind of forget what their strategies are. And I go up and go, well, let's look at the industries going on, right? Someone's losing a lot of money several rounds, I'll call them a nonprofit, make them a little fun, uncomfortable in front of their peers. Someone's doing well, I'm like, can someone knock them off, right? So creating an environment that's competitive, which is exciting for them. They have fun with it, but it allows me to teach them some fundamentals, particularly around financial analysis and just competitor analysis, and then I realize they've learned it, right? It's not a financial ratio, it's I'm better than them, and this is how we measure it for it. I do peer review at multiple stages. Again, built into the sim, so one of the reasons why I've chosen CAPSIM, because a lot of it's built in. Multiple versions of it, but I'm using the newest one. And what I do is I normally catch them after 2 rounds, then I catch them around 6 rounds, somewhere right in the middle, or close to it, and then at the end when it's complete for it. And those get averaged actually to create grades. So if anyone's slacking in the sim, but what you find is some students start strong, drop in the middle, come up. That's just a natural style. Some will not feel comfortable, and as they get more into their team and understanding, they'll be much stronger. So it allows me to see their participation, and they also get that feedback. I give it back to them. It's blind, but they get feedback amongst their own team, a 360 type review of how well they're doing and what they can do to improve it. And then lastly is a decision audit trail. This is really from the faculty. It's an important piece to have. I'm actually going to show you what it is, because it is a sim. You could set it up and just let it go, and that's nice. You have a busy week. Sometimes it can go, but often I'll get questions from students, or we're digging deeper into some of the issues, or I want to know what a team is doing. I don't understand the results for it. I can dig into deep dive into the results to see. So this is a live one I have right now. These are kind of just a dashboard it has for me. For it, there's an assessment exam. Where's the, okay. What I generally will want to look into, and this is something I think for anyone who uses simulation, whether using CAPSIM or not, is you must have a back-end view of what all the students are doing. So in this case, I'm showing you, I can look at decision summaries, and I can look at an audit trail for each team. I can also log into each team and have their viewpoint for it. But I can look at and go, who's been doing the decision on it? Are they using one, or are there multiple people? So in this case, there's been 3 rounds. Michael Bershi seems to be putting all the decisions in one upload, which is either done on an Excel spreadsheet or a web form. for it. Or, in this case, they did 4 decisions for the same round, which means they were updating them. Tells me what was the problem. Was the team having trouble making decisions? And I can then look into it. Here we have different people, which is interesting to do it. And then I'll show you, because they may be just doing part of it. I might just be doing marketing and update it. But I can look in and see the decisions quickly, where they've made, what's changed, and then look at them consecutively, which is a really deep dive of the thinking of students that we don't normally get. Right? We get the finished product for it. Now, I don't do this every round for every student, but I'll look at it and scan. If a team's having trouble, that's generally when I dive in, or if they ask a question for it. Now, at the very end, I tend to export all this to Excel. I do a pivot table, and I see if I see any trend lines in their decisioning process and what they're doing for it. So it does require some excess work by the professors to get into it if you really want to control it. But it's turnkey, and I think that's an exciting part about it. Now, after the sim, what's important? They're required to do a debrief. Now they do this, sometimes I'll do it in class, but I have actually now converted it where they're actually recording it in a group session. Sometimes Google Chat, something else, so they'll do a presentation. I give them the template, I don't want them to stress that, but I go, here's what I want to know. Right? What was your original mission and vision? What was your strategy? How did you plan on running your company? How did that change? Give me the highlights of how you ran your company. What worked, what didn't. Round by round, because then I can dig into how well did they understand executing against the strategy, as well as how well did they understand making a marketing decision here really screwed up something over in finance. We didn't connect all the dots for it. The worst performing team is generally the most enjoyable presentation. We tend to have a lot of fun with it, right? Let it be loose and for it. So that's a key compartment where they debrief now what they did, and they have to be honest, because in the beginning, for the first 8 rounds of competition, they're competing with each other, and they'll get vicious, and you don't want to share information. It's kind of a fun environment. Now the time is anyone can ask anyone else a question. Why did you do that in round 5? 9 out of 10 is we didn't know what we were doing and we made a mistake. And we're like, oh, okay. So you didn't mean to half the price of something, because it really screwed us up when you cut prices by 50%. Even though it was a mistake, we felt your mistake in the market. I then have them do a personal reflection paper. And now I'm actually converting it now to video, by the way. That's just a more way to grab their iPhone or something and do it. And talk through what did they think it was going to be like. And generally I thought it was going to be a game. And that goes away. It's now an immense learning experience of how complex it is to run a business and all the details for it. But also, how did they develop? How did they think they were going to work with teams? How did they deal with conflict? And there's always, because it is a challenging simulation, these conflicts. How did they deal with it? How did the relationship build or fall apart with some of their teammates? How are they going to address that for it? So it's a really introflexion of it, what was going on. And then the last peer review. For it. So there's 3 peer reviews in total I do, one beginning, middle for it, and I'm able to put these together and average them and get their peer review grade. Now, why is that important? Well, grading, that's always been what matters. How do you grade these in a way that matters? My mistakes early on is the performance of the team in the sim early on. That was the key grading factor, led to unrealistic decisions of how you run a company. Artificially really trying to throw off other companies that in ways would hurt profits, could almost be unethical. And I saw just an unhealthy learning environment. I said, yes, I want the competition, but I find that's more just of a gamification amongst themselves. But as part of a grading component, I think it's much better to have them focus on what did they learn and how did they work together as a team, and then how well did they put it together. So I do peer reviews 40% of the grade. Don't let anyone slack. And just a little caveat is any person can get fired by a team by unanimous decision. You don't want to get fired, by the way, because you have to do all the group projects individually in the class. Can't do it without my approval, but I've seen it happen. Someone was just a real unprofessional person, is the proper word, right? And got coached. I coached it once. They said no. Fired him. He had to go do the whole sim on his own. Had to do a whole group project on his own. They said, and the team didn't have to carry that the entire semester for it. And the peer reviews reflected a very good team after that for it. The debrief is 40%, so it's a huge amount. They have to dig deep and go, why did they make decisions and what happened from it? Right? It's that learning loop. Describe it to me. Tell me how it worked, what happened there for it, and then the performance is 20%. Yeah, it's there, but as long as they finish, they're then the passing grade. So like, don't worry if you bomb out your company. What did you learn? How could you have changed it? What would you have fixed? Right? Let's learn that for it, and realize you're still getting a passing grade on that part. But yeah, if someone's done well, they've just dominated the market. Now, just because someone's won doesn't mean they also get the max points for the grading. You have to dominate the industry. Right? There's 6 competitors, so someone's like, oh, we were $1 above this, or depending on what metrics I'm using to measure. Like, no, you didn't really win, right? I want to know that you got 70% of the market, and you have 80% of the profits. Then we say you dominated the market for it. So just kind of to wrap it up, I've found, simulation can be difficult, and I have had a lot of pitfalls with it. But in an online environment, I found it's kind of its home. I do love it in the classroom because it creates a higher level of engagement than anything I've found yet. In a true learning piece, it has that team component. It's a safe learning environment for it, where they can make mistakes, but they get that immediate feedback for it, and then the assessment. And I think a lot of us are feeling the pressure, faculty, to get better assessments. Live text is kind of our bane right now, right? How do we get better assessments into our classes, and how do we communicate that out? And this has given me a standardized way, which is given some flexibility in my business plan and my case analysis, to not worry about assessing there and get much more creative in my grading and my projects, because I'm not thinking this is my primary tool for assessing for it. So that's using simulation and online environment. Any questions? Yes?
Do you use hypothetical companies, or do you use like real, actual companies?
It's a hypothetical situation. So it's a high-tech, in their case, it's a high-tech industry, so it's fast growth, but I put in a randomizer, and it also has a recession. So 1 year it's growing 20%, and then I'll have a recession, and then have to rebound from it. I do require them to name their company, so make them personal, even though it's a hypothetical within it. And it is a B2B, so it does take some of the complexity out of it. We have to simplify it somewhat in an environment for it. So the B2B environment, the selling is more about the channels and awareness to an end user versus the customer, which has a much more complex buying behavior. I leave that to the marketing professors to dig deeper there. Yeah, so.
Do you introduce all of the modules in the beginning of the simulation?
Oh, the add-on modules,
yeah.
Right. So in this case, in this simulation, I can add on a TQM, which has 4 different types of TQM decision making, and then HR, which has training, recruitment, some added ones. They're fine-tuning metrics, right? They're not the major levers of strategy. I will turn on HR in round 2 and then TQM in round 3 normally. I do not start at the first round because it's already hard enough. Yeah. And then I just trickle it in, and by that time either teams are doing well and they're starting to figure out it, or they're having trouble and they kind of just ignore it.
Do you do the 4-hour exam at the end, but it's only finance-based, the one for...
The comp exam?
Yeah.
It's not just finance-based, but you have...
I've taken it, I don't know.
Well, finance is the language of business, right? So that's how we have to read how things are performed. But yes, I use the comp exam, that's my assessment.
Okay, the 4 hours.
Yeah.
How steep is the learning curve for you as a professor to pick up a new sim program? I know there's a lot of complexity and a lot of moving parts. Did it take you a while before you tried a lot of different sims before you settled in this one?
Yeah, I tried 4 different strategy sims and different learning needs and running it myself, actually as a student, what it would take. For this had the lowest learning curve of all of them because it was the ability to turnkey it and let it go, and I learned from it. Then now I've really learned to fine tune it because you can change all the variables when you set it up. There is, it's almost limitless. Or you can just get up and turn it and go, this is a really good sim, select a few criteria. One of the things, we just went through a whole analysis of sims for the school, for business school, looking at where do we go in the future for it, and where we found a weakness in a lot of them. There were some really, they were exciting sims, but when we looked at the administration screens and functions, were very weak. And that generally shows the maturity in a company and the understanding of how they architect it, that the faculty has to have pretty good window, like the audit trail. Often to do that required writing a script. I said, if I can't click the button, we're not writing a script for it.
We also offer quarterly trainings, so you can visit work with other professors who have experience with the simulation, also with our customer support teams. They actually teach you how to teach the sim and how to use it, some best practices. And then we do have like a bank of customer support people you can call, and they can run sim for you if you like until you get comfortable with certain aspects of it.
And they have videos, books, they have all the training. And I think another checkbox, whatever sim you take. I just ran one in an entrepreneurship marketing class. It did not go well. It was a nice sim, but there was none of the training materials needed. And I ended up, basically almost pausing it and going, okay, students, don't worry about it.
Piggybacking on this, actually, when we checked it, which was with different faculty, but it was really good support for the students on that side, because literally the faculty was not really sure how to run it or what was it. So it was good to help the support team, and they were kind of explaining to us what we could have done or what is it. So they'll go over it. It was great. That was like very extremely helpful.
Yeah, from a faculty viewpoint, because this is a complex one, and sometimes I may be swamped on other things.
Yeah.
Their support team is one of the best. So, and if anyone has a tech question, I don't have to answer it.
Yeah.
I immediately go, it's why you pay CapSim, your fee, right? About $60 per student, right?
Yeah.
You contact them and figure out if your web page isn't working, you figure it out with them, right? So I can get out of that
That loop.
that loop, and I can really focus on strategy and the learning outcomes I'm focused on. That was it, yeah. All right, well, thank you very much. It's almost lunchtime. I didn't know to drive you out all that.